You've been betrayed, but it's not by the woman you think, it's by yourself. Why does betrayal always seem to come from those closest to us, and why do we keep allowing it to happen? The truth is, we are often our own biggest betrayers. We set ourselves up for disappointment and heartache by placing unrealistic expectations on others, expectations that are beyond their control, and sometimes even beyond our own understanding. The root of betrayal lies in our emotional immaturity and our inability to manage expectations in a way that is healthy for our relationships. But there's a way to break free from this destructive cycle, and it's through the timeless wisdom of Stoicism. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control others, but we can control how we perceive them and how we react. When we expect others to fulfill needs they are not capable of meeting, we set ourselves up for pain. When we fail to control our emotions and expectations, we invite betrayal into our lives, often from the people we love the most. But what if the key to stopping this cycle doesn't lie in changing other people's behavior, but in changing how we view our relationships and manage our own reactions? This video will explore how the Stoic perspective offers the solution. By looking inward rather than outward, we can take control of our own expectations, reactions, and the way we engage with others. Stoicism teaches us that true peace and security come from within. And when we understand and accept this truth, betrayal can no longer have power over us. Together, we'll uncover how to prevent betrayal from ever happening again by recognizing the truth within ourselves and breaking free from the self-deception that causes us to look for fault in others. Expectations are a double-edged sword. On one hand, they give us a sense of direction and hope, but on the other hand, they can quickly turn into a source of pain and disappointment when they are not met. When you place unrealistic expectations on someone, especially in an intimate relationship, you set the stage for betrayal, not from them, but from yourself. When we enter relationships, we often expect our partners to fulfill all of our emotional needs, to validate our worth, and to provide a sense of stability and happiness. This sounds ideal in theory, but the reality is, no one can meet such high demands. It's not their responsibility to carry the weight of your happiness, emotional well-being, or sense of self-worth. Yet, we often expect just that. We put the person we're with on a pedestal, as if they're meant to be a source of constant comfort and support, fulfilling roles they were never meant to fill. Imagine you enter a relationship expecting your partner to always be your emotional caretaker, your source of comfort when things go wrong, and the one who constantly builds you up when you feel down. At first, everything seems fine. She may provide the support you crave, offer validation, and even give you space when needed. But over time, the weight of these expectations begins to take its toll. No matter how much love and support she gives, it never feels like enough. You become frustrated, and the resentment builds as you subconsciously place more pressure on her to meet your needs. What you may fail to realize is that she too has her own emotional needs, desires, and boundaries. The constant pressure to meet all of your expectations begins to feel suffocating, and eventually she may withdraw or even lash out. You might feel betrayed by her distance, her lack of emotional support, or her refusal to meet your needs. But the truth is, you've betrayed your own peace by placing these unrealistic demands on her in the first place. No one, especially not your partner, can carry the burden of your happiness, emotional stability, and sense of self-worth. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "We are not disturbed by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens to us." This quote is at the heart of why betrayal often begins with unrealistic expectations. When we expect others to meet needs they can't possibly meet, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment. But the true betrayal occurs when we fail to recognize that we are the ones responsible for managing our own happiness and emotional well-being. We give away the power of our peace by relying on external sources to validate us. Think about it. When you place your happiness in the hands of someone else, you surrender control of your emotional state. You are essentially giving them the power to either make or break your day, your mood, and even your life. But Stoic wisdom teaches us that true peace comes from within. It is not dependent on others fulfilling our needs or desires. It is about managing our own expectations, understanding our own emotions, and finding contentment in our own sense of self-worth. By setting realistic expectations, we free ourselves from the emotional turmoil that comes with unmet desires. Instead of expecting our partners to fulfill roles they were never meant to play, we can learn to meet our own needs, cultivate our own happiness, and take responsibility for our emotional well-being. When we stop relying on others to validate us, we begin to build inner strength and resilience. This is the foundation of true self-reliance and emotional independence. One of the biggest traps in relationships is the idea of perfection. We often expect our partners to be flawless, perfect in every way, without faults, flaws, or limitations. We want them to be the perfect companion, friend, and lover. But this is an illusion. Every person is imperfect, with their own set of struggles, insecurities, and limitations. When we place someone on a pedestal and expect them to be perfect, we are setting ourselves up for inevitable disappointment. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't have standards or expectations in relationships. It means that we need to be realistic about what we expect from others, understanding that they too are human beings with their own challenges and limitations. When we can accept our partners for who they are, rather than trying to mold them into something they are not, we can create healthier and more fulfilling relationship. The root of betrayal often lies in the expectations we place on others. When we expect our partners to fulfill roles they are not equipped to play, we set ourselves up for disappointment. But the greatest betrayal comes when we fail to manage our own expectations and emotional needs. Stoic wisdom teaches us that our peace is not dependent on others, but on our ability to control our thoughts, emotions, and reactions. By letting go of unrealistic expectations and taking responsibility for our own happiness, we can break free from the cycle of betrayal and create more harmonious, fulfilling relationships. When betrayal strikes, our first instinct is often to point the finger at the other person, the partner who lied, cheated, or broke our trust. We feel hurt, angry, and wronged. And while those feelings are valid, it's crucial to pause and reflect. Did the betrayal truly begin with them, or was it set in motion by our own internal struggles? In most cases, the seeds of betrayal are sown long before the moment we feel the sting. Betrayal is not always about what someone else does. Often, it starts with ourselves. A lack of self-awareness, emotional dependency, and an inability to manage our own needs and desires can create expectations that inevitably lead to disappointment. This internal misalignment often leads to a cycle of emotional turmoil, which, when unchecked, manifests as betrayal, not just from others, but from within ourselves. The problem lies in how we approach relationships. Many people enter into relationships expecting the other person to complete them, to fill the voids within them, and to act as a source of constant validation and support. These needs become unspoken demands, and when those demands aren't met, betrayal begins to feel inevitable. It's not that the other person is malicious, but rather that we have set unrealistic expectations that no one can possibly meet. Consider a man who spends all his time, energy, and emotional resources trying to make his partner happy. He pours his attention into meeting her needs at the expense of his own well-being. He sacrifices his own desires, his hobbies, his boundaries, believing that by making her happy, he'll be validated and loved in return. Over time, however, this pattern begins to take a toll. He becomes resentful because his needs are never addressed, and his emotional reserves start to deplete. Eventually, his partner may fall short of his unspoken expectations. She might fail to acknowledge his sacrifices or not reciprocate in ways he anticipated. The sense of betrayal grows, even though his partner has done nothing intentionally wrong. She wasn't even aware of the weight of his unspoken expectations. In this situation, the betrayal doesn't lie in her actions. It lies in his failure to communicate, his neglect of his own needs, and the emotional imbalance he created by trying to derive his worth solely from her approval. This internal failure leads to the feeling of betrayal, when in reality, the root of it is self-neglect and unmet internal needs. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." This quote is at the heart of why self-reflection is so essential in preventing betrayal. When we place too much value on others, on their actions, behaviors, or approval, we give away our power. We forget that our emotional well-being should not be dependent on anyone else. In fact, the only thing we truly have control over is ourselves, our responses, our boundaries, and our expectations. In this context, betrayal is not merely an external act of someone breaking our trust. It is the internal betrayal we commit when we neglect ourselves, our boundaries, our needs, and our emotional independence. When we rely on others to fulfill what we have yet to fill within ourselves, we set ourselves up for emotional chaos. And when others inevitably fail to meet these hidden expectations, it feels like betrayal. The reality, however, is that it is we who betrayed ourselves by placing responsibility for our happiness and peace outside of ourselves. Self-reflection is a powerful tool in navigating relationships and preventing the cycle of betrayal. The first step is recognizing that no one else can truly complete us. The idea of relying on others for our happiness is flawed because it ignores the fundamental truth that emotional fulfillment begins from within. When we are in a healthy relationship with ourselves, we no longer expect others to serve as a constant source of emotional validation or support. Instead, we approach relationships with balance, offering support and care, while also maintaining our own sense of self-worth and identity. Being self-aware means understanding our own needs, recognizing when we are sacrificing too much, and learning how to communicate those needs in a way that is healthy and constructive. It's about understanding that our partner is not a solution to our emotional voids. They are a companion to share in life's journey, not someone we depend on to save us from our own internal struggles. Once we begin to practice self-reflection, we learn to take responsibility for our own emotional state. We understand that while external circumstances can influence our feelings, it is ultimately our responsibility to manage them. No one else is to blame when we feel betrayed, hurt, or neglected. Yes, people will let us down at times, but if we are emotionally self-sufficient, we will not crumble in the face of disappointment. We will have the tools to manage our feelings, set boundaries, and communicate our needs effectively. When we stop expecting others to fulfill our emotional voids, we stop setting them up for failure. We stop creating situations in which they can betray us by failing to meet our unspoken expectations. In essence, the more we cultivate our own emotional intelligence and self-sufficiency, the less likely we are to experience betrayal. The root of betrayal often lies within us, not in the actions of others, but in the expectations we place on them. When we rely too heavily on others to fill emotional gaps within ourselves, we set ourselves up for disappointment. Self-reflection and self-awareness are key to breaking this cycle. By understanding our own needs, communicating them effectively, and taking responsibility for our emotional well-being, we stop giving away our power. In doing so, we protect ourselves from the true betrayal, the one that comes when we fail to honor and care for ourselves. By practicing Stoic principles, we can prevent emotional chaos and build relationships that are based on mutual respect, not unspoken demands. At the heart of many emotional betrayals lies the desire for control. In relationships, this often manifests as a need to shape or mold the other person into the image we desire. Someone who meets our expectations, fulfills our needs, and acts in a way that aligns with our vision of the ideal partner. However, the belief that you can control another person's behavior, emotions, and actions is not just misguided, it is the root cause of suffering. Control is an illusion, and in trying to exercise it, we sacrifice our peace and lose sight of the true nature of healthy relationships. Imagine a man who wants his partner to behave a certain way. He manipulates, pressures, or pushes her into fulfilling a role she never signed up for. Perhaps the role of emotional caretaker, provider of constant validation, or someone who always agrees with him. Over time, when she refuses to conform or falls short of his expectations, he feels betrayed. The truth, however, is that it wasn't her actions that betrayed him. It was his own unrealistic expectations, his attempt to control her, that set the stage for emotional disappointment. She may not have violated his trust intentionally. Instead, his expectations were built on the belief that she could be shaped into what he wanted her to be. The moment he tried to control her, he was already setting himself up for the feeling of betrayal. When we try to control others, we overlook the one thing we do have control over: ourselves. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." The Stoics teach us that peace of mind comes when we understand that we can only control ourselves, our thoughts, emotions, and reactions. The more we try to control someone else's behavior, the more we lose control over our own emotional state. The moment we attempt to manipulate or dictate how someone should act, we set ourselves up for frustration and eventual betrayal. To avoid this, we must focus on what is within our power, accepting others as they are, setting healthy boundaries, and embracing freedom in relationships. Picture this moment. You're in the middle of an argument, emotions running high, and a sense of betrayal weighs on you. Her actions or words have triggered something deep inside you, something you can't seem to shake. But then, in the midst of the storm, something shifts. You stop, you pause, and suddenly it hits you. The problem isn't her. It's the expectations and control you've been holding over her all along. The anger, the frustration, and the sense of injustice begin to melt away as you look inward. You realize that your own unresolved feelings, your own emotional chaos, have been the real cause of the situation. It's not her betrayal, it's the betrayal of your own peace. The betrayal was something you unknowingly invited. You didn't see it before, but now you can't unsee it. She didn't betray you. You betrayed yourself by failing to recognize your role in this cycle. The weight of this realization is heavy, but it's also liberating. It's not about blaming her anymore. It's about recognizing your own responsibility in creating the environment for betrayal to flourish. In this moment of clarity, you feel the weight of understanding pressing down on you. You are responsible for your emotions, for how you react to situations, and for the expectations you place on others. By failing to manage these emotions, by holding on to unrealistic expectations and the need for control, you set the stage for betrayal to enter your life. The blame no longer falls on her. It falls squarely on your shoulders. But instead of feeling defeated, this truth gives you power. The next time you feel anger rising, the next time you're tempted to blame her, you will pause. You will take a breath, and you will check your expectations. Are they fair? Are they realistic? Do they place an undue burden on her? This moment of self-awareness becomes a turning point. You now know that you control your own peace, and you no longer need to rely on external validation or behavior to feel grounded. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "What we fear doing most is usually what we most need to do." Confronting the truth about your expectations and your behavior is one of the most difficult things you can do. But it's also the key to breaking free from the cycle of betrayal. When you face the uncomfortable reality that you have been the one to invite chaos into your life, you reclaim control. This act of self-reflection and responsibility is the true path to emotional freedom. The truth is painful, but it's also transformative. By confronting your own role in the betrayal, you empower yourself to change, to heal, and to create healthier, more balanced relationships. Betrayal is a reflection of what you have allowed within yourself. The moment you stop expecting others to give you happiness, fulfillment, and peace, you take back control. It's easy to point fingers and blame others when things go wrong, but the real power comes when you realize that your emotional stability is in your hands. Once you do, the power shifts. No longer is betrayal something that wounds you. It becomes a lesson. And in that lesson, you discover strength. When you stop relying on others to fill the gaps in your emotional world, you begin to cultivate inner peace that can't be taken away. Betrayal no longer holds the same power because your happiness is no longer contingent on someone else's behavior. This shift transforms not just your relationships, but your entire approach to life. The cycle of disappointment and emotional chaos ends when you take full responsibility for your peace. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Epictetus, this Stoic truth is liberating. The idea that external circumstances don't control us, our judgments and responses do, puts the power back where it belongs, with you. When you stop believing that others are responsible for your happiness, betrayal no longer becomes a recurring pattern. You begin to live on your terms, detached from the whims and behaviors of those around you. Have you ever faced betrayal in your relationships? What was the deeper lesson that changed your perspective? Share your thoughts below. And if you found Stoic wisdom helpful, subscribe and share this message with others who might need it. This video encourages the audience to reflect on their own experiences with betrayal, while empowering them to shift the narrative. By reframing betrayal as a lesson and not a wound, viewers are invited to comment, share, and engage in a meaningful conversation about self-awareness, control, and boundaries.